Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the latest of the Richmond Council's community conversations. Usually, we do one of these gigs with either 2 or 3 wards. However, you are in luck because tonight we are focusing solely on queue issues. So you have the whole evening purely for queue. Aren't you lucky? So this evening, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Councillor Gareth Roberts, and I am the leader of the council, and I am the host, the chair, as it were, for the evening. Largely, apart from in the introductions and the sort of the various linking and setting the questions, you ideally won't hear very much from me because we have your ward councillors to answer the questions which you're going to put to them. I will be acting very much in the way of this new lifeline that they have on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when they can ask the host. So they may want to come to me for a bit of additional information, but otherwise the answers will be coming from either your ward councillor or Councillor Eamon, who is here with us today. I just need to run through a few bits of housekeeping before we start. The event is going to be recorded and will be published on the council's website. So if you ask a question, then do be prepared for the fact that you will be recorded for posterity on the council's website. Everybody is muted other than the panel, because otherwise it would just become a free-for-all and a hubbub. What we found works particularly well when it comes to asking the questions, because you may think to yourself, how am I going to ask a question if I'm muted? There's a chat function on Zoom, and if you just type question in the chat function, don't type the actual question, but just type question, and I will come to you in the order that the questions are placed, and hopefully we'll be able to get through all of the questions this evening. If we don't reach your question, then my team will contact you after the event and say, listen, you wanted to ask a question, you weren't able to, and we'll get an email answer back to you. Because you've had the good taste to come, you've had the good taste to ask a question, we should have the good taste to answer for you. Please don't use the raise hand function, because that takes you out of the list and into another list, and it just makes everything confusing. And don't add chat into the chat function, because it makes it really difficult for me to spot who wants to ask a question. And I sometimes miss somebody, and then the person who gets missed gets terribly shirty and suggests that they are being muzzled by the council, which is not the case. There has been a meeting etiquette which has been sent to you. First and foremost, if you are going to ask a question, make sure you turn your camera on, because it makes it so much more immediate for everybody concerned. If we can see the person who's asking, you don't have to, however. You've been sent the meeting etiquette. What we're hoping for is that everybody's going to be lovely and polite and not be too breezy with the comments. If there is any kicking off, either in the chat or whilst asking a question, we've got sort of online bouncers who will step in and encourage you into a separate room where we can address the issue and hopefully bring you back in. But I'm sure that that's not going to happen. We don't have that sort of behaviour in queue. I'm reliably informed. So we've gone through all of that. After the event, we're going to be sending everybody details regarding the issues which have been raised if necessary. So if perhaps we'll talk about the local neighbourhood watch scheme, we will email all of the participants and give you the details of how you can join, stuff like that. So it only leaves me to introduce the panel that you have this evening. We have Councillor Lottie Campanale and Councillor Ian Craigie. Unfortunately, we can't be joined by Councillor Burford today as he is indisposed. We also have Councillor Alex Eamon, who is in attendance to answer questions on parking and other related matters. Okay, so what we do at this point is we kick off with a video which is going to give you some useful information about what the council has been doing on your behalf for the last however many months it is now. It's about 5 months now, isn't it? So we're going to be showing you a video. I apologise in advance because I thought that the voiceover I was giving was measured and statesmanlike. However, it is, I'm afraid, dull. So the information is exciting and interesting, the voiceover less so. So if we can now stand by with the tape and we can run VT. Thank you.
The first half of 2020 has been an extraordinary period for all of us. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on all our lives. The Council has not been immune. The pandemic has brought huge challenges to us and to the way in which we deliver services to residents. Throughout the whole period, we have been committed to providing key services to all residents and help to those who need it most. As a snapshot of some of the things we achieved in just the first month of lockdown alone, we provided more than 6,000 hours of home care. We provided social care for over 1,600 vulnerable adults. We answered over 2,000 calls to our community hub. We provided 47 rough sleepers with accommodation. We delivered over 500 books directly to residents from our libraries and saw a 365% increase in people using our online library services. We had over 42,000 views of our online sports classes. We collected an estimated 47 tonnes of waste and recycling every day. And we kept our 51 schools open, providing education for over 500 children of key workers and vulnerable families. We know that things haven't always been perfect, and many people have been frustrated by some of the lockdown measures that have been put in place, and the fact that some of our services had to stop to ensure the safety of residents and staff. But we've been committed to prioritising those most in need. During this challenging period, I have been blown away by the continued incredible community spirit that we have seen across the borough. The pandemic has brought out the very best in so many of our residents, with neighbours providing a helping hand, the weekly clap for our carers and frontline workers, residents donating to food banks, and the general willingness of so many to go above and beyond in their support for members of our communities. Following a call for volunteers, Richmond CVS received a staggering 3,000 applications from residents eager to help in any way they could. We have seen groups delivering food parcels, setting up virtual fitness classes, checking up on elderly residents that are shielding, and collecting prescriptions. This generosity from residents and local groups has been genuinely humbling. And as we look to the future and towards recovery, we know that there are still huge challenges ahead. The recovery period provides us with an opportunity to make environmental changes that are needed across the borough, and we have already started implementing some of these. For example, we have already started with our post-COVID-19 highway recovery strategy, looking at how we can ensure social distancing, encourage walking and cycling, and ensure our children can get to school safely. Over the next few weeks and months, we will be looking at other ways we can support local communities. And of course, residents will need to play their part in the future as they have done over the last few months. We've worked hard to ensure that businesses have received the funding they're entitled to, awarding a total of £35.79 million to over 2,100 local businesses. But now as our high streets begin to reopen, we all need to make sure that we support our local shops. Many of our businesses are run by local people, and if we don't use them, we will lose them. As we emerge from this difficult period and look towards recovery, we want residents to come on board and provide us with their thoughts and ideas on how we can create a better borough for all of our residents. This moment provides the Council with an opportunity to reflect and improve the way we work and engage with residents, and your support and ideas are key to that. Thank you for coming this evening, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
So there you go. Voiceover aside, a useful and informative video, I think. Just show a bit of a snapshot about this kind of stuff that we've been doing on your behalf over the last few months. Now, talking of people who have been doing things on your behalf recently, it's now time to hear from our water councillors. We're going to go with Councillor Campanale first, who's going to give you a brief update of what she's been doing for you in Kew over the last, well, however many months she wishes to go on about. Not go on about.
2 and a bit.
That's it. Go on about.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'd like to start off by particularly thanking Abby Palmer and the team at Kew Neighbourhood Association for their incredible assistance in our Kew community during the pandemic. They've been amazing, shopping, looking after people, and been so helpful and feeding things our way to us councillors when needed, but just cracking on and looking after everyone. Despite a considerable, very active elderly population, we have had a very low COVID rate and very few associated deaths in Kew. And for that, I'm grateful. I'd like to thank our residents for being so law-abiding, compliant and patient. I'd also like to thank all our staff at the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames who have been dedicated and hardworking throughout the crisis. As chair of the Policy and Performance Review Board, I've been monitoring our council performance with two hats on, one in my community and one with our general performance. And I will be reviewing our policies and performance in response to those notes. I'd like to thank you for attending this evening. We are aware that not all residents can be digitally included, and I personally look forward to the next community conversation being in person again. And please remind any residents who haven't been able to log on this evening, who may not be so happy with using IT, that they can always telephone or email the local councillors. And I will fill you in on what I've been doing through the questions or do a wrap up at the end. I'll hand over to my colleague Ian Craigie. Unfortunately, as Councillor Roberts said, Councillor Burford's unwell and unable to attend this evening, and for that he sends his apologies.
Thank you, Lottie. Thank you for that. So lovely to see all those friendly faces. It has been a bit of a, as it has been for all of us, it's been a shame not to be able to kind of get out and about and see more people. So it's great to see so many people attend this evening, particularly on such a lovely sunny evening when I'm sure many of you would have places you'd rather be with a glass of wine. So thank you for that. I think I won't talk for too long because I'm aware that everybody's lockdown experience has been really personal, depending on their accommodation situation, depending on their state of health and any concerns or caring provision they've had to make for other people. So I very much look forward to the questions coming forward later. I think there's a few areas where all of us councillors were quite active. As has been alluded to in the video, there were some teething troubles with the refuse collection for a while. For those that aren't aware, we had the wonderful combination of a lockdown creating lots of stress and challenges and a much greater increase in the amount of refuse being produced because everyone was at home. And at the same time, we had a contract change on the provider of the service. That was almost a perfect storm. And I actually think in the context of that, the services held up pretty well, though I appreciate the loss of the green waste collection. And I have had, and all the councils have had a fair amount of correspondence on, was a problem on a warm, sunny spring when people really did want to be getting rid of their garden waste promptly. So thank you for your forbearance on that. And I'm aware that's a priority for most people. Other areas I think will be addressed in the questions. I know there's a couple of big local issues, the controlled parking zone consultation. Looking forward to hearing your comments and feedback on that now. And we've also got the cycle lane, which has gone in on Kew Road, and looking forward to your comments on that. And lastly, I'll just second what Councillor Campanale said there. You know, we were really overwhelmed by the number of volunteers, the level of support that came through. There were so many people offering to help, in fact, that a lot of those volunteers that put their hands up weren't then called on, but it was noticed and it was very much appreciated. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you both for that update. We'll be coming to questions soon. I noticed that there are none at the moment in the chat, so do, if you wish to ask a question, just type the word question in the chat, not the question, but just the word question in the chat. Somebody yesterday was having terrible trouble accessing the chat, by the way. So we will keep an eye out amongst you all, just in case anybody is gesticulating wildly. But you're all filling up now, Mark.
The gates have opened, Gareth.
Excellent. Precisely what we want to see, because we're going to come to the questions right after this next segment, which is you'll be aware that the council is, has got form for taking money left, right, and centre whenever they can. But we've decided it's rather time to do something back. So we've created this thing called the Local Area Fund, and this next video is going to tell you all about it. And you will see what benefit you can get from having a jaunty backing track across the voiceover, because it makes all the difference, as you will see. Thank you.
£180,000 fund has been launched to help support community-led projects in every ward in the borough, helping to rebuild local areas and connect communities after the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The £10,000 pot for each ward is intended to support local initiatives helping launch new ideas and developing projects to make a positive difference to our borough. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a widespread impact on how we deliver services and support local people. We welcome all ideas on how to improve your local area, particularly those that aim to help rebuild our communities, connecting people and finding new ways of supporting each other. Any individual, local group, charity or business can submit an idea or apply for a grant. Applications need to demonstrate how the project meets one or more of the following priorities. Enable local people to develop, agree and deliver their own responses to local issues and build stronger communities. Make public places more attractive, enjoyable and distinctive. Support local initiatives that address the causes of climate change and minimise the environmental impact of carbon, waste and pollution to protect the future of our borough and our planet. Promote the vitality of our town and neighbourhood centres. Widen participation in sports and physical activity. Enhance the artistic and cultural offer and protect the borough's heritage. Improve health and well-being. Improve crime prevention. Improve community assets. Before you apply, you will need to discuss your idea with your ward councillor to see how it fits with local priorities. You can do this by sharing your idea online or contacting your ward councillors directly. And then, your idea will be reviewed by ward councillors and officers to recommend next steps for your idea. This may include an application to the local area fund, but could also include signposting you to another source of support or funding for your idea. If the idea is suitable for the local area fund, we will invite you to submit a formal application. Once a complete application has been submitted, it will then be reviewed and we'll let you know if it has been successful. We look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, so there you go. The local area fund there. I mean, it's £10,000 award, so it's by no means the lost treasure of the Aztecs. But it's if you consider we have got 18 wards, so that's £180,000 and initiatives over the next year. And don't forget that other funding streams, such as the Civic Pride Fund, will continue anyway. But if you have an idea, get in touch with the local councillor and speak about it. Okay, so right, we are now at the point which we've all been waiting for. It's slightly ahead of schedule, which is good. So we are now at the questions bit. So I'm going to go right to the top, and we have our first question. First cab off the rank is from Valerie Booth. Valerie, are you there? Hello.
Yes, I'm here. It's to do with the parking consultation, and I'm speaking on behalf of Churches Together in Kew. And can we ensure that on Sunday mornings there is accessible parking outside every church? Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Okay, who wants to take a crack at that one?
Well, I'm quite happy to speak if you like, just as I'm here on these subjects. As the chair of the Transport Committee, thank you very much for the point. I think depending on the outcome of the consultation and exactly what comes to be as a result of that, clearly the council take into consideration a whole range of other users and uses of parking as well as residential. And so, yes, I hear the point, and I know that council officers will do everything we can to ensure that, you know, the important contribution that churches and other faith centres play continues to be able to be supported through the provision of a suitable level of parking. So thank you very much, and we'll take that away.
Okay. Thank you. Lottie or Ian, would you like to come in at all, or shall we move on to the next? Lottie.
I'll just add that I know at St Anne's on the Green, they actually have their own parking warden because they have their own parking area at the church. But obviously, yes, we will make sure that that is accessible. And as Councillor Amon says, once we've got all the results of the consultation, that is something I will raise. Actually, I hadn't actually thought of that, and I will make sure we raise that with officers.
There you go. It was worth coming along this evening just to make sure that it's firmly on the councillor's radar. Thank you. So we're going to move now to Caroline Brock, who has our next question.
Thank you. I've got two questions, but they're linked.
We'll choose the best one, and we might come back. If there's time, we'll come back to you on for another one. How's that?
Well, they're kind of linked. I don't mind.
Oh, well, okay. Well, let's see what. Keep them short, and let's see if we can rattle through them. How's that?
The first one is whether there has been an increase locally as nationally in mental health issues and domestic violence, and whether you think the council resources to support that. And the second one, sort of related in that it relates to rough sleepers, where there's often a mental health issue. And the government did something to deal with rough sleeping, but the worry is that the funding will disappear. Sleepers will go back on the streets unsupported.
Okay, the sound quality broke up a bit there, but it was about domestic violence and mental health issues during COVID, and then the second one about the issue of rough sleepers. We've got you as well placed. Lottie is a trustee of Spear, the local homeless charity, so she will know all about the answer to this question. So let's bring Lottie on this.
Shall I go? Gareth, you're also cutting up a bit, as was Caroline. But Caroline, I think I got both your questions. On the domestic violence, yes, we have been monitoring. Actually, there has not been an increase in our borough as yet. However, we are expecting there to be an increase as lockdown unravels, because we have much more financially controlling type domestic abuse, and so we're expecting there, as things unravel, that there will be more. So we are prepared for that. We did do a scoping project last year on the availability of accommodation for domestic victims of domestic violence, and we did conclude that there are enough options, but that is not the reason that prevents people leaving. So we know that there are places to go, and the team is prepared for a rise. And again with rough sleepers, so we have, I know that Spear has temporarily housed over 200 people. Obviously not just this borough, because we cover 5 boroughs at Spear, and I think it's about 80 in this borough. That accommodation is temporary, it's in hotels. You will note that in Kew there was still a hardcore that still wouldn't come in, the last few. That is a complex question. I don't want to take up a lot of time with that, but to be assured, the best thing you can do if you are concerned about a rough sleeper is to go onto the Spear London website, click on report a rough sleeper, and let the outreach team know where that person is, and then the outreach team go out 3 nights a week and they engage with the rough sleeping community, and it can take a very, very long time. And if you're frustrated with that, you can always ring me and I will do what I can to get the outreach team out if it's a more complex case.
Okay. No. Do you have more? Okay.
No,
Ian, would you like to come in at all?
No, Councillor Campanale very much is the expert of our team in Cube, so yeah, very comprehensive answer.
Okay, just so you're aware, Caroline, our Borough Commander, Chief Superintendent Sally Benatar, is a survivor of domestic abuse herself, and she is placing this matter very high on her radar as a issue which she wants to make sure gets tackled, because all too often it can be the case that it is, swept aside to an extent. But during lockdown, we really do need to be more vigilant on the matter. One thing which I'm talking fun. But one of the things which I spotted on the various social media platforms, and this is something which everybody can keep an eye out for as we're doing more of these talks, is if you see somebody holding up their hand like that and then trap their thumb, that is a distress sign. That's saying, please send help. So if you see somebody on the Zoom that makes that sign, that is now recognized as a clear distress sign, and that they're requiring help, because sometimes they may be in a controlling environment where they cannot speak clearly. And so that is one of the ways that you can help if you spot that sign. Okay, so
Can I just add?
Yes, of course, Lottie.
Just wanted to add, there is also, throughout the pandemic, there has been free train travel for anyone fleeing a domestic violence situation, and all anyone had to do was turn up at a station and they would be let on a train.
Thank you.
I wondered about mental health more broadly as well, not just domestic abuse, because I think there's been an increase in kind of national abuse.
I think we are prepared. You know, as a borough, we are prepared for the onslaught of mental health issues. We have been pre-warned that this is the next stage as we unlock, or if there's another, you know, if the pandemic comes back again. We are aware, and we are putting things in place and mitigating as much as we can in advance. And of course, we did set up the mental health, the ability to donate to the young person's mental health, which was that higher council taxpayers were asked to contribute towards, and we've had a phenomenal amount of donated through that scheme. Which has been really helpful, because you know, the facilities are there but they're flooded, so we need to raise the funds to keep them going.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for your questions, Caroline. Okay, we're going to move now to Marion. There is a question from Marion. Apparently my mic keeps cutting out a bit. I'm sorry, I will try and keep my focus entirely on the screen.
Hello, it's back to parking. I'm concerned that the council's approach is a sledgehammer one to outsiders. There needs to be some nuance, as the problems are not the same in every road. Some roads will need to exclude outsiders most of the time. Other roads, like the one I'm in, have so few households that only part of the road needs to be closed to outsiders. So please, can we have a varied approach that responds to the needs of individual roads, and can we please be a welcoming place? I am disturbed by the narrative which is about trying to deter people from coming to Kew, and in particular from coming to Kew Gardens.
Shall I start, Gareth?
Yes, please.
So I think, let me start with your second point. I think they're all perfectly well-made representations. I think, let me be absolutely clear on behalf of the borough. We do want people to come to this borough. We are a welcoming borough, and of course we want people to go to the Royal Botanical Gardens in Kew. What we do want, though, is we want people to do that in the most sustainable form that is possible for them to do, and particularly given the sustainability agenda of Kew Gardens, that's all the more important. On the material point about the CPZ, sure, we'll take that away. I think, I mean, the way we look to deploy CPZs, if there weren't one, is to obviously look for a configuration of roads that are in support. We don't impose measures on roads that don't want controlled parking zone hours. Mm-hmm. And clearly, if there are parts of Kew that have distinct and different views about times of operation or the way that they want things to play out, then we can look at those subsections and see whether there are things that can be done. Of course, we still need to have a credible and kind of understandable controlled parking zone framework so that it's not confusing to a visitor. If you end up with too many variations within a relatively small area, of course, that has exactly the disincentive impact that I think you're seeking us not to deliver, which is that people could become confused by varying hours of operation and so on. So there's a balance to be struck here, but certainly we'll look at that. The only bit I think that is more challenging within your ask is sort of subdividing roads. There have been historically instances of that in terms of CPZ deployment, and invariably what I think you will find is that the part of the road that's kind of left out or has weaker hours or some kind of relaxations invariably feels a different impact, and more often than not ends up petitioning in future years to be included in the scheme that they're adjacent to. So we need to think all this through, but the points are well made, and I'm not deaf to them.
Okay, Marion, does that answer your question?
Yes, I just think of this afternoon, this road was full of cars disgorging families. Where are those families going to go when they can't park here? I want them to park in my road.
Okay.
Well, okay. I mean, it's a good point, and I think my observation is that if you share the view with your neighbours, then that will come through very clearly within the resident consultation.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much for your question, Marion. We're going to move on now, unless the board councillors have anything to say.
Just maybe
Ian.
one tiny thing. Thank you for that question, Marion. If the view is taken that the existing CPZ arrangements are fit for purpose, then they stay where they are. And I think, as you say, though, I agree. It very much depends exactly on the distance your property is from one of the gates, effectively, and some nuance would be good if possible. But there's a practical challenge there of getting that implemented. So I'm happy to see what we can do as much as possible, but there is a situation where we have to both make it simple for the user. But yeah, absolutely. Second Councillor Raymond's thoughts. We definitely want to be welcoming, but we just want to protect the right to residents to park near their houses. And in the moment, with everybody mode switching from the huge amount of public transport they were using to get to the gardens, a lot of people are trying to switch to cars. There is a huge amount of pressure in the summer. And another point we have discussed internally, which isn't really, unfortunately, practical, would be like a more seasonal approach, because the pressure on the parking is so much higher in the summer. And though actually there are, Christmas at Kew, if it's active this year, or other peak periods and stuff. So, but if that again is very difficult from a practical point of view to implement and enforce.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. Okay, next question is from Jane Isford. Oh, you're unmuted, Jane.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes, good evening. I'm so sorry about that. I'm not very good at these things. I just wanted to say, with reference to things, basically it's all about business, I'm afraid, because I have Aroma Organic in Sandicombe Road, and I do feel that we're always neglected. We had a shoot yesterday, and it was all about the
Film shoot.
Parade. I brought this question up before at the last meeting, because I really think that we need some signage. There is sufficient signage coming out of the station and on Leybourne Park, but we have nothing as they hit the top of the road, Station Parade, to say Sandicombe Road, more shops along here. And that refers to myself and all the businesses and the restaurants further along Sandicombe Road. I think we need some signage, and it would help the businesses tremendously, not just mine, but all of the other businesses further along. I have spoken to Lottie about this. Sorry, Lottie, hello. So she knows how I feel about it. It would really be great. They've managed to do this in Mortlake and in Barnes High Street, which is quite small, so I don't see why we can't get a similar signage, okay? The other point is about the CPZs and the traffic restrictions. I've actually read this. Now, if they're implemented, I think it will hit the businesses hard. We already suffer from, being in a secondary position in Sandicombe Road because we have residents opposite most of the shops. If this is implemented, the CPZs, what is going to happen? Where will people park? It will deter them from coming here. And also, we depend on their business when they go to the Kew Gardens Hotel. It's a knock-on effect for all the other restaurants as well. And so I'm wondering if these, if it's implemented, all these changes, I'm afraid I have to agree with Marion. I think it will be really difficult for people to come into Sandicombe Road, and I fear that we'll lose a lot of small businesses.
Okay, Lottie.
Hello, Jane.
Hi.
Okay, first of all, on the trade, there is some evidence that people actually spend more in their local community shops if they're walking past than if they're driving past. Fingers crossed that is the case. And that improves. And in response, and with the parking issue, we will be responding to the results of the consultation. So fill the consultation in, and please get other shopkeepers and other traders and residents to fill it in, because we can only respond to what people tell us in the consultation. And we have to consider everybody's comments. On the signage, and you're absolutely right, you did raise this before. And what we're waiting on is, obviously the COVID crisis has delayed so much, but what we were waiting on is that the Kew Gardens, the Botanic Gardens, are changing their internal signing, and they're going back to the old sort of signpost, this way, that way sign. And we were waiting for them to change theirs so that we could replicate something similar in Kew Village. And we're also, I noticed the local area fund that we were talking about earlier, the 10K for each ward. Several applications have already been forwarded to me, which are about signage. I'm applying for signage for a cycle route around the other side of Kew. Kew Society's put in an application for signage, a sort of heritage trail style thing. So I think it is something that we could look at collaboratively. I would like to have a signpost outside the station that one of these arm style ones that
finger posts.
Signpost, finger posts. Thank you, Gareth. That actually point to not only the shops in the immediate village around the station, but to your parade and the parade further down Sandicombe Road. Or we could look at maybe doing a directory. I mean, I am working on some business stuff, and we are going to have a visit soon from our business team and introduce them to every shop and work out what would be best appreciated in terms of promotion.
Yeah.
Ian, I don't know if you've got anything to add, Councillor Craigie?
Maybe just a couple of things. I think as part of a bigger picture, we're very sensitive to the fact that local businesses, particularly right off the runway between the station and the gardens, get so much less footfall. Like, you know, they get 5-10% of the footfall of the main runway, and even on the parade itself, one side gets twice the footfall of the other. So we're very sensitive to that. And I think one of the things we're keen to do, and this is something we can take away, is to make it easier to shift transport modes. So there's a whole range of things coming down way beyond the council's gift, I suppose, but, you know, e-bikes, e-scooters. If we can put some provision in place that, I appreciate you've got a fairly big bit of pavement in front of your particular shop. Maybe there's a discussion to be had about some extra bike parking, a safe place for e-scooters, something that would encourage an increase in footfall near you and also in the general Kew area. Would be something we could proactively look to do that would help you and also help the mode shift that we're trying to encourage in general. So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay, that's all very well, but I have to say that could I respectfully suggest that the next time you have a photo shoot, that Sandicombe Road can be included? Because I spoke to Sophie Needham, asking her on the day of the shoot if we were included. And she said, no, this was done months ago. And so it made me, you know, I was a little bit confused, not to say confounded, to find out if it was done months ago, why we weren't included. But the feeling in Sandicombe Road with most of the other businesses, because naturally we talk, because we will have small businesses trying to survive during COVID, etc. And the feeling is that we're always forgotten. So may I respectfully suggest that you actually try at least to implement some of the changes, you know, for instance, you know, the signage, that might help. And if there is another photo shoot, can we come on board?
Jane, can I just fill you in about the filming is a completely separate department, and it's down to what the particular film production company want to film. They don't sort of go around asking the shops. It's to do with it's set, and it is organised months in advance. But I can talk to you about this another time and fill you in.
Yes, because I think that
okay.
The possibility of most of the shops being shut at that time, if everyone knew there was going to be a photo shoot, say at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the morning, they would make sure.
We were informed.
It would be lovely and attractive so that they could go around and have a look for
But it's
instance,
kind of the
I
other way
see-
round. They pay
Yeah.
to film.
Okay,
Ah,
as I say,
okay.
as Lottie says, she'll take this offline with you, Jane,
Yeah.
and be the, but you know, we
I'll
are
pop
in the lap of the directors when it comes to filming. I'm afraid they choose their scenes carefully.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they would want to come to Sandy. Okay, we're going to move to Boti Malik Ahmadi.
Okay, I think I've unmuted myself.
Excellent.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Hello. I'm afraid I'm going back to the issue of rough sleepers.
Yes.
And my question is for the council, not what Shelter has done, what the council has done. As I understand, Shelter is a charity. It's a different matter. I do understand you work very closely with the council. So in the first video that we were shown, it was mentioned that 47 rough sleepers were accommodated. Now, what's going to happen to them after this? Is the council in a position to give them permanent residence? And also, how are they going to be supported now that they've got this chance? Can the council influence somehow to get them jobs, put them back on track, or when this crisis is over, they're going to be back on the streets? This is basically an opportunity which would be a shame to miss to turn around people's lives.
Absolutely. Lottie.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ahmadi. I am a trustee for SPEAR and I've been associated with it for 30 years. It was set up to accommodate single people who were homeless. And in respect to what is the council doing, the council, if you like, employs SPEAR to deal with the homeless situation. We have trained outreach workers, as I said before, who go out. And we have what we call a pathway program where we stay with people for life. We're not just providing emergency shelters. And we stay with them right through from encouraging people to come in, encouraging them to detox if necessary, and stay with them through helping support them into getting work and accommodation. So the best thing I would say is have a look at the SPEAR London website, and you'll see everything we do, and there's lots of voluntary opportunities there should you be interested. And on the longer term housing, yes, it's incredible, isn't it? When the COVID crisis happened, suddenly all this money is released and suddenly we're able to get everyone off the streets, which we've been trying to do for 30 years. Last week, the government announced the next tranche of money that is to be spent on longer term housing. But I would refer you, in detail, it's Liz Jarvis is the officer in charge, the deputy leader and officer in charge of housing, and she works very closely with our own council housing department and with SPEAR and other organisations, and it's very much a collaborative effort, and we are now in discussion with what we're going to do with the pot of money that the government is releasing for our area. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, hang on a minute. You're muted. I'm going to come back to you. Here we go. As to unmute. There we go.
No, thank you. I think I got my answer. So there is some sort of support system for them.
Absolutely.
After this.
Definitely is.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Not at all. We're going to move now to Angela Vincent, who has a question. We're just about to unmute you, Angela, so give us a moment.
Hello.
There we go.
Okay. Hello. I have been following the Royal Parks project for over a year now, trying to stop all vehicular traffic in all the Royal Parks. And I've been watching what's come out from the Richmond Council as well recently. Could somebody in the Richmond Council please inform the Royal Parks people how disastrous it is with the extended closure of Hammersmith Bridge for people in Richmond Kew, East Sheen, Mortlake? We need the vehicular traffic, dreadful word, going through Richmond Park. while the extended closure of Hammersmith Bridge, which looks to me like being for years and years, goes on. And I'm just very worried that they're not taking this into account. I had a quick word with you, Gareth, at one of the meetings about Hammersmith some time ago, and you said not to worry about it, it wouldn't happen. Well, I think that's not quite right.
What, the closure of the park entirely? Well, I didn't know COVID was going to come along, Angela.
Gareth, shall I say a little bit about what we have said as a council
yes,
to the Royal Park? So we are talking to the Royal Parks, and ultimately, I think, as you allude to, this is their decision. We can't force them to do something they don't want to do, or vice versa. So it's a case of making representations, and there are clear different. No, they're not necessarily clear. Some are clear. Some are unclear impacts of what different forms of closure Richmond Park could deliver, would have on different communities. We as the local authority, of course, are extremely alive to those. And while I totally commend, and I think most of my colleagues in the council would commend the idea of trying to make Richmond Park and indeed Bushy Park even nicer spaces for visitors, that can't be at a clear cost to residents where they live and work. And so, as we've said, in terms of any proposals, we'll be monitoring them very closely. We're working with the parks on that monitoring regime, and if there are displacement effects or impacts on certain communities that are negative, we'd either want to see the parks seek to remedy or mitigate those, or consider that the schemes that they've brought in are not sustainable without those changes. So I think the jury's out, to be honest. You mentioned a number of communities. I mean, you mentioned East Sheen amongst them. My observation about East Sheen would be, under certain forms of closure, East Sheen would immensely benefit. It really depends on what nature of closure Royal Parks decide to take, if indeed they choose one.
So can I understand that Richmond is talking to the Royal Parks, or you're just leaving it to them?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I'm speaking to them almost on a weekly basis.
Excellent.
Ian, do you have anything you... Oh, sorry, Angela.
They do understand that, you know, there are two hospitals that we go to, the Kingston and the Queen Mary's Hospital. I mean, I'm 82 and I drive a car, as well as ride a bicycle. And, you know, I cannot use the parks. And thanks to the cyclists, I haven't been able to use the park since the lockdown with the car, which has been very difficult.
We constantly remind them there's a world outside the park that they have to care about too. Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ian, would you like to come in at all?
Nothing a great deal to add to what Councillor Oman said there. We are in constant communications. We ultimately have no sanctions on the Royal Parks. They are in charge of their own land. But I totally understand your point, particularly here in Kew. If you want to get to Kingston Hospital, which is our main hospital, it's a real challenge for the vehicle driving through the middle of Kingston, particularly in the middle of the day. Though there has always been a real challenge of putting the car somewhere once you get to Kingston. I've never found parking when I've needed to go there, but I totally respect the fact it's now a very long and quite tedious journey via a vehicle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, so we are now moving to Richard Mason. We have a Roger Mason later, but Richard Mason, it's your turn now.
Right, thank you very much. Am I live?
You are.
Yes, thank you. There is a general push towards encouraging cycling, which I support, and we've got the cycle lane in Kew Road. And yet coming up to Kew Bridge, we've now got TfL trying to widen the road with an additional lane for traffic, reducing the pavement. Surely this was no doubt designed 2 years ago before COVID came in and all the changes that are coming forward. Surely, if anything, we should be looking at keeping either the pavements the same width or putting a cycle lane in there rather than another road lane.
I'll go first and then let the ward councillors again. Just broadly, I agree. I mean, I think the fact is, whatever proposals were in gestation with TfL, I think all bets could be off. I mean, they don't have the money to deliver the schemes. So, and I think the priority has changed both at national government, London, and right down to local authority levels. My view is that if we can enhance the existing Q Road scheme by connecting it through further, that would make a great deal of sense. And so I can't say in principle I disagree with anything you said, Mr. Mason.
Mm.
Are you in touch with TfL on that point, though?
Yes, insofar as they have furloughed an awful lot of staff. So they're a very skeleton crew, really dealing at the moment with only the emergency issues that they're handling, including the funding of these various schemes. But as and when staff come back and they have able to perform a more strategic role, I'm very happy to take that up with them in more detail.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Lottie or Ian? Ian.
Yeah, just to know, you've raised a very good point. I think we've all been communicating with that Councillor Eamon. We recognise that having a not really nice cycle lane on Kew Road now doesn't connect in a safe manner to the new cycle lane going in from TfL just on the other side of the bridge is two dots that really need joining quite urgently to allow people to have a really, it will be really nice when we get it sorted out, because you'll be able to go from the centre of Richmond and with all that high density of residents there to over the bridge and then right into central London through Chiswick. It'll be a really nice cycle lane and something that is sorely lacking, because at the moment the only way into centre of the city in a cycle friendly manner is along the towpath, which has a myriad of problems and is very slow. So no, we absolutely agree. The responsibility for the road ends at the top of Kew Road, where it joins Mortlake Road, where it joins the South Circular. There's a junction there we could definitely work on to make it more cycle friendly, and I recognise making two very narrow car lanes, vehicle lanes into that space, it is problematic for bikes. They always get squeezed out. After that, it is a negotiation with TfL, and they have no money and a limited amount of will to listen to us. So we will get there, and it is actually a top priority. But TfL are used to dealing with 32 boroughs across London, or however many there are. We are quite a small fish in a very big pond to them, and it's very hard to get them to engage in a meaningful manner. That whole south, there's all sorts of issues with the pedestrian crossing along that south circular section. We've lobbied them to change the pedestrian crossing timings and all sorts of things, and they really aren't very good at listening to us. But we're taking the point, absolutely.
I think to add to Councillor Craigie's point, though, the construction of the cycle route that we have put in on the Kew Road, I think puts the ball firmly in their court. It shows intent on the part of this local authority, on the part of the stretch we control. And now the task is with TfL, basically. So I think we've done what we can, and we'll continue to press. I know your councillors raised these issues with me. So yeah, good point by Councillor Craig.
Thank you.
Councillor Caminali was just coming, we're having a full house.
I just wanted to add, as Councillor Eamon just alluded to, I have already asked why, we did ask at the very beginning why the cycle lane couldn't be extended, and not only is that patched TfL, as Councillor Craigie has explained, but I think there are also problems around the green, the Kew Green. There's you're very limited as to what you can do and how wide you can go, because I think it's consecrated royal land. It's quite complicated. There's lots of laws and statutes, but it's TfL's problem essentially. And also to flag up that the cycle route that I'm suggesting is signposted would actually link up round the other side of the green and link up to the Kew Bridge cycle lane. So that would be another advantage, which would give a sort of family safe back route for the less speedy cyclists. And I'm going to apply for the signage for that. I think that's it.
Okay. Councillor Craig, you mentioned that there are 32 London boroughs. There are 32 London boroughs. And if you want a small bit of trivia, there are 32 pods on the London Eye, and there are 32 because we have 32 London boroughs. There you are, educating, entertaining, and informing. We have, I'm remiss, I missed Mr. Jeffrey O'Connell when I came down my list. So Mr. Jeffrey O'Connell, please.
Okay, is that me unmuted?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Well, good evening. My point of interest I'd like to discuss is regarding the 20-mile-an-hour zone. First of all, I'll say I'm both a driver and a cyclist. And I believe the 20-mile-an-hour zone in the residential areas is a major step forward and a contribution to road safety for our cyclists and pedestrians, without a doubt. However, I'm not entirely convinced it's proving successful on the Kew Road, being a main road. I myself struggle to do 20 miles an hour. It feels as if you're actually almost stationary on a big road. I noticed virtually nobody else manages to achieve it, including buses. And travelling further out towards Kingston, I noticed that on the road from Petersham through to Kingston, that's 30 miles an hour, and all of the roads off of it in the residentials are 20 mile an hour zones. And I thought, well, that seems to be like a practical solution, and one that's going to be easier to comply with for everybody. Is this under review, or is it just a done deal? Is it something that is being monitored?
I'll start again. I think on this is transport stuff again. So 20 mph has been rolled out across the entire borough as a result of the decision we took in 2018, I think. And so it's part of that. Kew Road, as I recall, was part of a number of roads that were raised by residents as roads they felt were less appropriate for 20 mph. Mm-hmm. And we looked at Kew Road because we did leave out a number of roads from the 20 mph application, basically to adjust the policy so that it more reflected the will of residents, given they were pretty split over its introduction. And Kew Road was not included within the list of exemptions because basically it's a dreadfully unsafe road. It is one of the worst road safety, I think it is the worst road safety road in this borough. And as a result, speed reduction is a material factor in reducing both the occurrence of and the severity of accidents on there. So I'll agree with you to a point, which is to say some of these major roads may require further work to make speeds come down further, both in enforcement terms or maybe even in road design terms. But I firmly believe that Kew Road, for all of the reasons I set out in terms of road safety, does deserve to have measures on it that bring down speed. And I think actually the fact that we've had to institute a cycle lane which has segregation on it on the Kew Road is, and that if you've been to the Kew Road before that segregation and looked at that cycle lane, you'd have found such appallingly low levels of cycle usage because of the fear of non-drivers of the issues associated with that road. So I share some of the anxieties you expressed, but I think what I want to do is I want to make Kew Road a safer road, not necessarily leave it at higher speeds and accept that it has to be unsafe.
Okay.
Can I come back on that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and I fully accept that position. I don't know if there's any evidence to support that keeping it down to 20 is making it safer. I think the adding of the cycle lane definitely is making it safer, because a lot of the accidents I've always been fearful of driving down there, of somebody opening the car door, bang straight into it, but as a cyclist and as a motorist. That's a primary danger there. A lot of traffic going across at Kew Gardens, of course, that once again there, you could slow it down like a school area. You can slow traffic down for that particular area. But as I say, it doesn't take away from the fact that I don't know you're getting a lot of compliance.
Yeah, all I'd say is there's a monitoring regime across the borough around 20 mph, which I feel certain will also cover Kew Road.
Sure.
And so we will know with some authority what effect has happened. There is an anomaly, of course, during this period in the lower volumes of traffic on the road during the COVID lockdown period and following have actually resulted in increases in speed. So we're in a bit of an anomalous space at the moment too. But I hear the points, understood.
Excellent. Lottie.
Just briefly wanted to add that 20 mile an hour was introduced across the borough for road safety issues, not just for the environmental issues. And the reason that we implemented across the whole borough, not one road 20, one road 30, one road 20, one road 30, is actually to do with cost and comprehension. So, you know, when you come into the borough is now essentially 20 miles an hour across the borough. That is the message we want to get across when people enter the borough, like in Bristol and others.
It's not on the 316 and it's not on the South Circular.
No, because the 316, the TfL controlled roads are not
Correct,
under
yeah.
our jurisdiction. So they remain at their speeds. However, I have heard that TfL roads will be following us, our example.
Okay.
So we're ahead of the game. And the reason that we went with 20 on most roads is because otherwise you have to put in signage each time the speed changes. So if you've got one part of the road that you think should be 30, that's an awful lot of cost just to have one little bit 30 and then the next bit 20. So that was one of the reasons, because we did scrutinise this, you know, and it was raised, and it is up for review. It is being reviewed.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. We're going to move now to Grant Lewison.
Yes, my question is about recycling. I want to know what happens to the material that's collected in the blue and the black bins to find out if it really is recycled or whether it just gets dumped, because I've heard that in some councils it just gets dumped and doesn't actually get properly recycled. I wonder if we could learn what happens to our refuse that's collected as nominally recycling.
Now, this may be the time that the councillors need to ask the host, but I'll let them have a start first. Lottie, do you?
I was going to say the best person to write to for the fulsome answer is Councillor Needham Watts, who is chair of the Environment Committee. There is information on the council website, but if you write to Councillor Needham Watts, she is the person who has most recently visited the depots where the waste goes. I do know there's been some confusion because the backs of the vans have changed. So whilst it may appear that they are they're mixing up the recycling, apparently they're not. Apparently there are different slots at the back of the van, and that's caused a lot of confusion. But for a fulsome answer on this one, I would write to Councillor Needham Watts, because, as I say, she has done the most recent visits, and a very exciting time was had, I believe.
There you are. Some people live for pleasure alone, Mr. Lewison. That's the thing. The one thing which I can tell you is that the Audit Scrutiny Committee, the audit met very recently, and they were discussing the fact that they weren't getting what seemed to be a very good, very sharp rate for their recycled materials, particularly the metals. They thought that they may have been subject to some sharp practice. So yes, it is going to the right places because we are looking at whether we're getting the best deal from our recycling provider. So that was where I was going to come in. But Lottie was quite right. Speak to Julie. Well, when she's not being attacked by a cat, and she's entirely right. And so do write to Julie and Needham what she can give you a very full answer on it.
Good. I'd just like, if I may, to
yes, of course.
At a point, somebody mentioned that it was difficult to get to Kingston Hospital without going through the park and without going through Kingston town centre. That's not true. As you go through Ham, all you need to do is turn left along Tudor Drive, and that takes you down to the Kingston gate to the park, and then you can turn onto the road that leads to the park, and that takes you directly to the hospital.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. It's useful to know. So we're going to move on now to, we've had Richard Mason, Abby Palmer. Abby Palmer, are you still with us? I ask this because sometimes people, you know, they go off to have their tea, they put questions. But Abby Palmer, are you still here? I will have a quick look.
Yes, thank you.
There we are. Hello.
I work for Kew Neighbourhood Association, so thank you, Lottie, for recognising the work of all the volunteers. I just wanted to raise that I think Richmond Council has been rightly praised for all the work that you're doing online, your communication. Out of our 239 clients that we have, we know that just under half of them don't access email and are not online. And I just wanted to say, and obviously not everybody's as impressive as Angela Vincent. The average age of our client is 82. I just wanted to say that if there was an initiative where you wanted to communicate with those people, we phone people and it's a struggle for us because obviously it's postage, it takes much longer than just being able to write an email, but I just wanted to raise that.
It's very useful to know. Thank you, Abby, for the work that you do. It's something which I've raised myself with the comms team here at the council about how we make sure that we are not, using those, reaching those people who may not be fully digitally conversant. Whether we can, because the problem is that when we have documents such as the recovery program, by the time it hits the bed of the printer, it's out of date. So that's the only bit of a fallback that we got, but we are looking at it. I'm not sure whether Lottie or Ian wish to mention anything on this. Lottie is muted. I'm unmuting her now.
Hi. Yeah, just as I said at the beginning, I am aware that we have a considerably elderly population in Kew because people live a long time here and they stay here because it's lovely. And I am aware of the digitally compromised. And as I said at the beginning, you can always, clients can always ring me on my landline is a Richmond number. So I'm more than happy to speak to people. I have an answer phone if I'm not in, if they find email difficult. Very few people do actually telephone, but I'm more than happy to speak to them on the phone or have issues referred through KNA through Abby and her lovely team.
Okay. Any more on this one? No? Thanks very much for your question, Abby. We're going to move now to Roger Mason, who has a question for us.
I'm concerned about the planning reforms which the government is in the process of introducing. The aim is to speed up the planning process, which I think nobody would disagree with. But there seem to be two policies which may deny residents and groups like the Kew Society, of which many of you know I'm currently the chair, from participating in the planning process. One is the introduction of the zone system, which will allow developers to go ahead if they follow the rules set within a particular zone without any challenge from residents or societies. And the other is the abolition of classifications, which may, for instance, allow the conversion of business premises, offices, into residential accommodation without any challenge. So my question is, what are the council's plans to ensure that residents and bodies like the Kew Society will still be able to have their say and that developers can still be challenged? Thank you.
Anybody?
Well, I'm happy to. I'd love to hear your view, Councillor Roberts. But yeah, no, thank you for the question, Roger. Yeah, I'd skim read the white paper that came out. Was it midnight last night, or I skim read a summary of that. I agree. There's a serious cause for concern there. It looks like we're going to get a lot of our power taken away to influence where stuff goes. I think in terms of Kew specifically, rather than in general terms, the zoning, I'm hoping, won't be a big deal because we're 100% built. So the green spaces we've got will stay protected. They're all either public parks or royal parks or and that World Heritage Site. So they're going to stay protected. Likewise for the strip along the river, the Metropolitan Open Land, I suspect that classification may change, but I can't believe it's going to be anything other than protected in some form going forward. The business to resi is a bigger concern, and I haven't got a good answer for you about how that's going to play out because they probably in Kew is quite vulnerable to that. There are bits of land that could be turned into quite profitable conversions. The stopgap the government's putting in is about the quality of those premises or the quality of the residences that are created. And I haven't seen the detail on that, but I'm not very optimistic actually. I was going to say I was optimistic. I'm hopeful that they'll have some constraints in there about access to natural light, access to local infrastructure and facilities that actually in practice means you can't turn shops into residential willy-nilly. And the other thing I would mention is large parts of our part of the world are conservation areas. And I would guess that provides some extra additional layer of support as well that I haven't seen is going to be removed. But I do think, so as has already come up, those premises on Sandokan Road, for example, which are already under residential flats, they are probably vulnerable because I think they're outside the conservation area. And yeah, I will have to, my attention is definitely on this, as I'm sure the planning officers are within the council, because they're about to have their whole world changed. I'm sure what you've said will be, and we are very, very concerned about, you know, losing our high streets and losing our small shops. So we're on the case. The outcome of yet is to be decided, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else wish to come in? I mean, you may remember, Roger, that one of my previous regenerations, well, Lord True, this used to be a particular bugbear of his. He was particularly keen to make sure that local authorities, with their role as a planning authority, were able to, you know, properly represent their local communities, to make sure that they weren't ridden roughshod over. You know, by whichever government is in power. Indeed, I was looking up. I mean, this is how I spend my weeks, folks. I was looking up his speech in Parliament on the 17th of March 2016, and he said that the local communities, the arbiters as local communities, should be respected fully at every level as legitimate public authorities. One does not always hear that language, sadly, from whatever government are in power. Now, I'm hoping that he'll be making noises in the right places, as of course he is now a Minister of State within the government at the moment. So I am hopeful that we may indeed have a willing ally right at the heart of government who may be able to make the case on our behalf. But we are incredibly concerned about particularly as Ian has been mentioning, the business to residential. And we are waiting to see whether the existing Article 4 directives that we have in place remain in place, and how robust they can be to, you know, to defend. Because the problem that we have with the business to residential conversions, for those people who don't know, is that they can often result in terribly substandard homes. And we need to make sure that if we are going to be providing more homes in this borough, and we should never be in any doubt that we do need more homes and housing in this borough, we need to make sure it is of an adequate standard, because we don't want people living in substandard accommodation, to be honest. Does that answer your question? The other thing I would say is that this question was asked of Martin Ellingall at the Teddington community conversation. So it might be worth going on the recording to see what he has to say about it as well.
Well, thank you. And I think the fact that you're expressing concern yourself is actually very helpful. Thank you indeed.
Excellent. Thank you for your question, Roger. Okay, we're going to move now. Giles Dixon has a question.
Good evening.
Hello.
Oh, yes, I am on. Yeah.
You're on.
Well, somebody has already answered my question to some extent, but I'm asking about the Kew Road, the cycle lane on the Kew Road. I mean, since it's been installed, I go up and down the Kew Road a fair amount, and there's hardly ever anybody on it, and regular cyclists that I know avoid. And there are really two aspects to the question. One is, what evidence do you have that you need that cycle lane on the Kew Road, particularly since it is now a 20-mile-an-hour limit, as is Richmond Park. And one regular cyclist I know said, well, once it's down to 20 miles an hour, assuming that that is adhered to, we don't need a cycle lane. But the other side of it, of course, is a bigger question. I know that the government or the Mayor of London and others are pushing for cycle lanes with, I think, the idea that you'll get people out of private cars onto cycles. But I'm questioning, I'm interested to know what evidence there is for that, or is it just a hope? Because it seems to me that it's just as likely that people, if they go onto a cycle, they're avoiding public transport rather than a cycle. And public transport is in rather dire straits at the moment because there aren't enough people there. So I mean, there's a bigger issue over cycle lanes, and I just question why we should suddenly have a fixed cycle lane on the north side of Kew Road, which so far about 2 or 3 people a day appear to use. There is, and may I just go on to just say, I mean,
yes, of course.
But I mean, I live on Kew Green, and therefore there is a related question, which concerns your proposal to move coaches from the Kew Road to Kew Green, because given the number of coaches that arrive at the Victoria Gate, which is the only part of Kew Gardens that's geared up to deal with large numbers of visitors, not the Elizabeth Gate, I'm concerned to know what assessments, what formal consultations have been carried out to see whether or not the use of Kew Green as a coach park, which is what it would, or a coach drop-off point, is what assessments have been made to see that it would work, because it seems to me it's full of problems, and indeed it was tried several years ago and it was abandoned. Okay. Sorry, I'm sorry to conflate two issues, but
not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
I'll do my. You're testing my memory with the various points there, but I'll try and address as many of them as I can. So I think start with the general agenda. The point is the government, as you rightly point out, have requested that local authorities make change, and the basis of that, if I distill it down, is because there is a concern that with a compromised public transport network with reduced capacity available for the foreseeable future, that really leaves in terms two alternatives if people are to make journeys, really car-based journeys or active travel ones, walking and cycling. And so it's necessary to incentivize, to provide the right infrastructure for walking and cycling so that fewer people resort to car usage. And let's be clear, this is a benefit for car users because none of us want to be stuck in a car when we have to use it, gridlocked with people who could realistically be making their journeys by other more sustainable means and not causing congestion. So I think there's a strong argument for making the change. In terms of Kew Road, I think this isn't a case of just a numbers game either. So it was the relationship between the free parking, which was incentivizing visitations by car, and the loss of a valuable piece of cycle infrastructure on a road that, has been said earlier, it has significant safety issues, and even with 20 mph has speed exceedances. So it's about creating a safe space. A good example of that, and forgive me for going on about this, but I think you need some detail here. When the gardens themselves were shut to visitors, and in even the initial stages of reopening, I was written to by the union representing the staff at Kew Gardens, who were required to make their journeys between parts of the gardens via the external road, via Kew Road, in order to minimise any chances of pedestrian and cyclist conflict within the facility. They wrote to us with immense concerns about using that road and requested that we make the change that we have. So I think there's a strong case here for safety. The other related point is that the types of people who are cycling now are not necessarily the same types of people that are cycling pre-COVID. There are a lot of new adopters of cycling out of need because of the public transport being compromised. And as I think I've said in correspondence with others, I go down to the road concerned frequently and watch and see what's going on. And although maybe the volumes at times are not vast, the actual types of cyclists using that lane are very different, I would say, from certainly the people who would have cycled along the Kew Road, if at all. I mean, I've seen people with children on front cycle carriers, and really what I describe as utility or ordinary cyclists, which is what we want to encourage. So that's, I think, really important. And the other thing to say as well is that the scheme at the moment is not the final scheme. They're water barriers and they're imperfect in the layout and in the effects that they have on, say, rubbish and leaf collection and so on. So it's not the most appealing present setup that it can be, but within days, the engineered measures involving kind of sticks and other infrastructure, wands and orcas as they're formally described, will go into place. And that will make the lane permeable. So if you encounter a cyclist ahead of you that's going too slow, you'll be able to come out and go beyond them, which you can't presently do in the present system. So there are a lot of drawbacks to the present very urgent measures that will be overcome when the more semi-permanent scheme goes in. On the coach parking, very briefly, all I'd say is, look, it's kind of a red line of the council, I think, given that we've put in this mandatory cycle lane with segregation in light of government guidance. you can't put coach parking in the middle of it because that invalidates its purpose. You know, if you go a long way and then you've got a coach in the way or multiple coaches in the way, that's dreadful and won't serve its intended use. Do I think that we've definitely nailed the solution for coaches? I don't know. And I think that's why it's been put in by a temporary traffic order. Views will be able to be sought during the period. We'll see how it works. Clearly, there's not much usage of coaches at the moment because of the COVID-related distance restrictions. But as those increase, then there'll be different impacts. And we'll be open to making further changes. But my view would be that the entirety of the Royal Botanical Gardens is a treasured institution, and simply turning Kew Road into at times as it is or was sort of coach parking lot was not a good outcome either. So we're working within the tough physical constraints that we've got to try and provide all of the needs of all of the users, and that's tough because Kew Gardens is such a fantastic facility that so many people want to visit. We may not have got it right in one bite, but we'll keep working to get it there.
Okay, well, yes, well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but what you're doing is actually damaging Kew Gardens because they're set up for, you know, they've got the way of handling the large numbers of people at the Victoria Gate, and there surely must be some way of being able to create laybys for coaches there rather than on Kew Green. And incidentally, I had a meeting with a senior executive of Kew Gardens yesterday, and he raised the subject of this story about the staff of Kew Gardens being told they had to cycle down the road. He said that was completely false. It is not the case. People are perfectly on the staff within the gardens are free to cycle within whatever the regulations are there.
Now,
well, the point I'd make is regardless of whether or not Kew Gardens insisted those staff do that or not, the union, on behalf of those members, clearly felt that road was unsafe for people to get to work and to also transit during work. So I'm not really interested personally in that.
That's a different point.
Yeah, well, but it's the material point that affected our judgment. So one of the points that affected
you
our
said
judgment.
the Kew Gardens had stopped, had told people they had to cycle down the Kew Road.
Well, that's the information I received. Just let me finish. That's the information I received. You've got different information, fine, but the point nonetheless stands. On behalf of their staff, their members, they felt that Kew Road was an unsafe road and they wanted a segregated cycle lane on it. So whether it was required by Kew Gardens or not, they wanted it made safe.
Okay, I mean that's not my battle anyway. But I mean the fact is that I think you're going to have a very big problem with a lot of coaches on Kew Green accessing, and the one-way system will make things worse. With 20, 30 coaches, all bunching. But anyway, we can't go on about this for other people.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do wish to move on to, Lottie, is this a new point?
Just briefly on the coaches, we're not saying we've worked out the solution yet. It's not easy. However, they weren't really meant to be parking on the Kew Road anyway.
No.
And it's not going to be a coach park. It's not going to be a coach park because it's dropping off. They are what is meant to happen and happen now is that they drop off and then park at Old Deer Park and then return to collect their cargo. And unfortunately, that hasn't been happening. But we have been in liaison with the Botanic Gardens throughout COVID and throughout discussions about what to do with this. And we are working with them to find a solution. It's not a them and us situation. And, you know, we are keen to find a solution that works for everyone. And actually with COVID and the gradual implementation and coaches arriving, it's a way that we can work it out together with the gardens who have in common a desire to encourage public transport ultimately.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for that, Lottie. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Dixon. Now, I've been spotting somebody called administrator who's been gesticulating at the screen. I'm not sure. Last night we had somebody who was gesticulating a lot because they weren't able to say in the chat. So I'm just going to unmute you just a moment and ask if it's a question or a follow contribution to this point. Are you able to unmute, Sarah? I'm asking you to unmute. There should be a little message on your screen saying unmute.
Ah, yes. Looks like it's done.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, sir.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm sorry to attract your attention in that way. I've been typing question onto chat and not getting my name on the list. So I've been frustrated, but I'll try and find out why that.
The lady from Whitton yesterday will be delighted because she was concerned that it was only going to be her. Now we have two.
Nor do I. My name is John Godfrey, and I live on Kew Green. Why I'm called administrator again is a further mystery of the Zoom.
I just think you have been terribly grand.
I'd like to follow up on Giles's question. First of all, I'm really not sure that it is true that liaison has taken place between Kew Gardens and the council. I'd like to see some evidence of that. My understanding is that Kew Gardens were given very little notice of the change in the scheme, and that they were perturbed about it, and that they have not yet had any satisfactory contact with the council as to how the system is, how the arrangements are going to be resolved. Now, as to the parking, as to the use of the one-way system and coaches on Kew Green, this was tried some years ago, and the scheme was abandoned. And I would like to ask, what study has been made of the previous scheme and of the reasons why it was abandoned before introducing this scheme? And if I may just have one other question, I'm extremely concerned by the requirement of much increased traffic, including perhaps as many as 60 coach movements in a day, leaving from the north side of Kew Green straight onto the South Circular Road, where there is no protection from traffic lights unless someone happens to press the pedestrian button. And when the pedestrian button is pressed, there's usually just an opportunity for one coach and perhaps one car to get out. And if there are large numbers of coaches, as there will be, travelling around Kew Green twice a day, once to drop off and once to collect, I think that's going to create a really major accident risk and traffic hazard. So two questions. Why haven't you, or maybe you have, if you have examined why if you've examined why the previous scheme failed, why do you think this one is going to succeed? And secondly, what do you have to say about the danger of large amounts of traffic having to turn into the South Circular?
So the things I'd say about this is broadly we remain open-minded about making further changes if they're necessary. So in terms of your second point, if further changes to junctions or so on are necessary, then we'd work closely with Transport for London to deliver those. In terms of the history, I'm very happy to go and talk to officers. You'll have to appreciate I only came to office 2 years ago, and I don't get presented with sort of tomes of red tide investigations, and it hasn't been raised with me by officers in terms of the work that they've been doing on trying to sort of solve these issues. Very happy to ask the questions. I would say only this, that not necessarily all the issues that were previously encountered will remain the same. Traffic has changed, the nature of transport has changed, so the effect may well be different, and if what we're proposing may be different from those original proposals. Until I've seen and heard that, I couldn't really comment on that. My view, though, is much aligned with Councillor Campanale's, which is that part of this is also about successful stewarding by the Royal Botanical Gardens of coach drop-offs and pickups. This is not a parking lot. This is about dropping off and then moving away and parking where is appropriate. And I think if that's managed effectively, maybe with the use of technology in the future as well to support it, then I do believe it can be done. It's not beyond the wit of man. Last point I would just make, sorry, Councillor Roberts, but is this. That description of the dialogue with Royal Botanical Gardens, I cannot accept for a second. I've been personally involved with those discussions. And if anything, this council has had to respond incredibly quickly on a whole range of things to do with COVID, including these active travel measures. We only became aware at very late notice of the Royal Botanical Gardens' intention to reopen. And it was important for us, given what we knew about the then pressure from national government to make changes and that funding would be made available, it was, in my view, important for us to capture that moment when the Royal Botanical Gardens resumed their activity. Because to try to introduce a change sometime while they're trying to struggle with the issues of coming back into being midway through scaling up and so on, I just think sent mixed messages. In light of COVID, I think it was important for us to strike while the iron was hot, and support a beacon of sustainability and saying to its visitors, if you must come, please come by better means than car, wherever possible. We have a car park, and we've also worked cooperatively with them, of course, over the use of the herbarium staff car park at weekends, which is bringing them additional revenue from people coming and paying to park within their facility. So this council remains engaged. We don't always agree. I've got to be honest with you. It won't always be the case that Royal Botanical Gardens and the borough can see absolutely eye to eye. I know Royal Botanical Gardens staff are much keener on preserving access via Victoria Gate for coaches. But as I said earlier, that for this council in terms of providing that cycle route is a red line and can't be crossed.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to, I've just noticed in the chat a comment from Stephen Speak, former councillor in the neighbouring ward, who says that RBGQ have stated explicitly that they're working with the council for a coach drop-off on Kew Road. So it's still in development, this issue. So
well, that's Councillor Roberts. That's a fair description of what Kew Gardens are advocating for.
Yeah,
it happens. Okay. It happens not to be the view of the council that that's deliverable. Okay,
so there we are. Right, Philippa Metherell, but we should be finishing at 8 o'clock. However, Philippa has been so patient that I think it would be rude not to take it, as she is the last question that I have on my list. So, thank you, Philippa. And is it going to be one about cars?
It's about sort of pathways and cycleways.
Okay.
So very quickly, all of a sudden, earlier this year or end of last year, we suddenly got these bicycle racks near Dancer Road opposite Sainsbury's and near the bus stop. And they're Lord Mayor cycle bars. But they've been put in the worst possible position. That part is a shared pathway. It's nice and wide. But it means when you get off the bus, you can't walk a straight line and walk off the sort of cycle path bit, although it's not identified. So there's sort of like 1.5 feet away from the edge of the wall, which is the car garage, which is the, I can't remember, Kia car garage. And I just don't know how they got put there or why, because no one using the 419 or the 190 or the R68 is going to put their bike there. They're just in the way. They're black, so at night you can't see them, and they've blocked a path, which is something that's a bane of mine. Is that we are getting cycle racks and we're getting cycleways and what have you put on our footpaths, and people who are pedestrians aren't safe to walk anymore. Walking from my place, from say Sainsbury's into Richmond, on the other side of the road, sort of the Richmond side of the road, you know, the path now is so narrow, you have to walk on the cycleway. On this side of the road, on the other side of the road, it's sort of patchy, so you can cycle up to Kew Road, then you're not allowed to cycle, and then halfway up that part of the road, which is a really wide path, you can cycle.
Okay.
It's just sort of a bit of a mishmash. And the second bit, very quickly, is there anything you guys can do? And I know that there's no planning at the moment about these damned bikes that are, well, they're not the Boroughs bikes, but they're all the different bikes that just get dumped everywhere. The number of times I've had to move them out the way. And if you are blind or sort of any way disabled like that, you can't, you know, a guide dog can't walk around them because sometimes. And they're just a hazard.
Okay, so
I'll be really quick. I'll be really quick, Gareth. I'll do a couple of quick bits. So I'm afraid I'm not familiar. Your councillors will be much more.
No, that's why I was going to bring the councillors in first,
go on,
Alex.
Go on, let's bring them in.
This requires a degree of local knowledge. So Lottie and Ian.
So firstly, on the bikes, the companies that provide them have an obligation to pick them up. So if you photograph it and send it to one of us councillors, we will then report it and have it cleared up and removed immediately. And if the bike company fail to do it, then we get the council come and clear it up. And I'm afraid on the cycle racks that you're talking about, it's not us, it's Transport for London. And we were it was news to us too. They just appeared, and I totally agree with you. Random place to put them, not near anything, not helpful. No idea why they've been put there. I think maybe Councillor Eamon probably has more contact with
Can we get them pulled out?
well, that's Councillor Eamon might be able to liaise with TfL on that, but I totally don't understand why they would be put there. They're not helpful. I'm afraid I am quite in favour of having bike racks put in where possible. But you know, having myself pushed a double buggy and a wheelchair many times, I'm always very, very careful about where I site them. And I try and get them sited where people are going to use them, like outside schools, and you know, to encourage people to actually cycle and you know, a destination. But I totally agree with you. But
it's just the blocking of the free flow pathways with these bikes and what have you. We need to look at.
Ian, do you have anything you wish to add? Last question
no,
of the night.
I was going to totally blame TfL as well. The question I would have though, is can we'll take that question away, because I hadn't realised they were such. I had seen them, but I hadn't realised they were such a problem. So we'll take that away and see if we can get them. Well, I won't say fixed, but modified, and see what we can do.
Or just removed. Removed would be the best thing.
Well, the person who can answer that is coming in now. Hey,
Thank you. All I really wanted to say on top of that, which the councillors have said, I mean, I was going to say sadly I wasn't omniscient, so I didn't know the detail of this specific set of cycle storage facilities. So if they're TfL, then we can try and take it up with them. But as I said, that may not be very swift given their furloughed staff. What I think is important relates to your point, though, is that there isn't sufficient cycle storage for the type of facility that Kew Gardens is. And so one of the things we've done is we've bid to one of the pots of money to try and win money for a proper cycle storage facility, which we've done on behalf of Kew Gardens for Kew Gardens to provide on their land, and they're happy to do so. Which is, again, to underline my earlier point, is an example of the cooperative working and engagement that we're having with them. But by doing that, if we can get that scheme funded and we can get that scheme delivered, that will take some of these cycles and need for cycle storage facilities off of very small sets of footway facility and put it where it needs to be, which is right next to the gardens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Okay, well, there we are, folks. Thank you very much for everybody for taking part this evening. Thank you first and foremost to our community engagement team and to our communications team, because they work so tirelessly to make all of this magic happen behind the scenes and keep shoveling the 50 fences into the correct meters to make sure that everything stays on the road. Thank you, of course, to our three councillors who've been here to answer your questions: Alex Eamon, Lottie Campanale, and Ian Craigie, who I think they've done an excellent job. I hope you found this useful this evening. It's a new way of doing it, and you know, we started off with a lot of people, tailed off towards the end, but that's the nature of things. People have got lives. But most of all, I mean, it's thank you to you. You are the people who make this a community, and that's why we want to have conversation. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Don't forget, we're going to be sending you an email with all of the details about the various points that have been raised, at which you can find out far more. And if you do need anything else, just get hold of your local ward councillors. That's what they're for. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a very pleasant evening and good night.